Well, hello, and welcome back to Curless Mania, where we talk all things pop, rock, and prog. Man, do I have a special episode today for you. A very, very, very special guest, Mr. Martin Popoff.
Yes, thanks for
How are
having
you,
me.
Martin?
Very cool. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. It should
Yeah.
be fun. Martin needs no introduction. He's written many, many, many books. I don't know how many books you have at this point. Well,
130.
130. There you go.
Yeah.
I own one of them right here, Sabotage. When I started getting serious about Black Sabbath, I was like, okay, I need to read up. Just like any fan, when you get serious about a band, you want to know more about them. And this was
Yeah.
a great primer. This was awesome. Really appreciate this.
Thanks. Yeah.
Love it. And I loved your Rush books too. The three Rush books, which I thought was brilliant. You kind of did it in different phases, where the 70s, 80s, 90s, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Because it kind of is that phase. You got the 70s Rush, you got the 80s Rush, and then you got, so it worked out. It's great books. Can't recommend them enough. But he's also he also does podcast. He does History in 5 Songs. He's head honcho Contrarians. He's also on Sea of Tranquility all the time, so you can't miss him. But I'm happy to have him as a guest on my channel right now, and we're here to talk about the one and only Peter Gabriel. Um, what an uncompromising artist. I mean, this guy is just constantly striving for new things, never totally unafraid. That's what I loved about Peter Gabriel. He's completely unafraid. And we are here to talk about two seminal records, Peter Gabriel 3, some people call it Melt, and Peter Gabriel 4, some people call it Security. I guess in the US and Canada it was Security, right? Everywhere else I don't think it was named.
Mine with the Peter's not on here, but I got Larry and Terry and Jerry Murata on that one. So
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Yes, Martin's always got the signed copies. I
Yeah.
love
So
it.
same three guys on that one. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Very, very
Yeah.
cool.
Here, I'll just finish the show and tell. We got Shock the Monkey, and I've got I don't remember here as well. 12-inch.
Nice.
Yeah. The funny one that I didn't bring out, actually I'll show you this too quickly, but I also have the oh, that's the wrong one there. Here we go. The German copy, right?
Oh, right. Right. Deutsches record. Yeah. Yep.
But the funny thing, buddy of mine, Jacques at Backstage Auctions, I bought a bunch of stuff from him once, and I guess he had an auction on of Peter Gabriel's ex-manager. I can't even remember his name, but one of the things I got in there was a poster of the Melt cover, right?
Mhm.
And it is, I measured it. I can't remember the size, but it comes in 4 huge folded up panels. I think it was 168 square feet, this thing. It's so huge. And I've got a few pictures that I posted from time to time where I've just folded it out around the office and took a picture of it. And you can't tell which way is up or down or whatever, because this thing just, one panel just takes up, it's whatever a quarter of 168 square feet is, kind of thing. It's just and it just sits in this big plastic bag as these 4 folded up. It's just black, one color, it's monochrome, so you need a huge massive wall. It's made to go on the side of a building or something like that.
Yeah. Like they
So
used to
cool.
have those huge tower records, and they'd put those massive displays up
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, though. It's kind of a cool thing to have.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. As a fan, I'm excited to hear that. I think that's cool. So I have to ask you, before I get into this sort of brief history thing, I have to ask you, I love to ask my guests, what is your journey with Peter Gabriel solo? Like, how did you jump into his solo stuff? Were you a fan with
Well,
Genesis?
you know, I was more or less a angry young metalhead through the 70s, right? So
Right.
it was more or less just heavy stuff, but my mind started opening up, grade 11, grade 12. I graduated in 81. But I think I would have to say that what really struck me was the Melt album, first of all. So hearing in Canada, that album went double platinum, so 200,000 copies in Canada. That was a top 10 hit, Games Without Frontiers. So I remember hearing that coming over the radio and sort of loving it. I was already into punk and a fair bit of prog. I was a drummer, but I don't recall through the 70s being a particularly big Genesis fan. And I don't have any memory of being on board with the first two Peter Gabriel albums at all. So I think, I've never been asked that. I've never even thought about it, but just thinking about it now, I'm pretty sure I came on with that album and loved it. So my mind was opening up to other kinds of music. And then I saw him live. I saw the very first concert that they ever put on at BC Place Stadium in Vancouver when they built the new massive stadium. Like, this is the first stadium that was bigger than the hockey barn, right? And
Right.
it's got the translucent sort of bubble top on it. Apparently Minneapolis's stadium is kind of this. Anyway, so the very first concert they ever put on in there was the Tubes on Outside, Inside, Inside, Outside, Outside, Inside. Peter Gabriel as the Sandwich Band, and then David Bowie on Let's Dance. And you
Okay.
can actually hear that Vancouver concert of Bowie on Spotify. It's part of something he released. So, anyways, that it was a massive, incredible concert. And so Peter was touring security, and it was like lay your hands on me, right?
Yeah.
It literally was like a religious experience. It was, at the absolute height of their creative powers, and arguably their height of their commercial excitement around the band, buzz around the band. Even
Yeah.
though So is a bigger record, it's like the most intense love affair the Deep fans ever had with Peter Gabriel is around security, right?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
when it's just, and so to see him as a sandwich band and Bowie's coming up, and I loved the Tubes at that point as well. Yeah, that was just an incredible, incredible
Yeah, yeah,
concert.
what a great concert. What a
Yeah,
bill. I mean, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, didn't were they all dressed the same with the Kyoto suits and were they dressed similarly in the band? Do you remember?
Uh don't remember, don't
Okay.
remember. But
Okay.
it was all the classic looks of
Yeah.
everybody, right?
Mhm.
If I can almost picture Tony Levin with like the knee pads
Knee
on and
pads,
the,
exactly, the knee pads,
yeah,
yes.
all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And one of the best concerts I've ever seen. Like I say, I can't remember if I've actually done this an episode, but I bring up this term all the time. Rock messiahs, right? Messiah like act, messianic acts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And U2 definitely comes to mind. Um, and not too many other ones. I mean, Pearl Jam at their height maybe comes to mind,
Yes.
but
Yep.
Peter
Yep.
Gabriel definitely comes to mind
Yes.
around security, right?
He sort of
It's
has that power and aura at
yeah,
his height.
yeah,
I do remember that Everybody Owned plays live. Like you said, it was really there were things that he was gaining steam in like in the early 80s.
mhm,
Um in a big way. And that's kind of why I think it's why I picked these two records is kind of like this is really his transitional period of becoming a big from a cult artist to a mainstream, artist. Um
mhm.
and like you said, I heard Games Without Frontiers on, New York radio. I grew up in New Jersey. I heard it on WNEW, and I remember thinking, who is this? Like, this is a really unique song to be a single. And I remember my friends didn't we kind of were trying to figure out what he was saying, the what is he?
Yeah,
We thought it was English and it's not.
yeah,
We thought he was saying she's so effing weird. We didn't know what he was saying.
yeah.
Um so anyway, let's get back to business. So basically, I do a brief history leading up to Melt, and that is we'll start in Cleveland in a hotel room in 1974. In the middle of the Lamb Lies Down tour for Genesis, he's the lead singer of Genesis. Genesis is a very, very successful prog band, becoming less and less of a cult act and becoming bigger band. And really, the Lamb tour is a huge tour for them. In the middle of this tour, he sits down with the band members in this gaudy hotel room in Cleveland and basically says, "I've had it. I'm done. I'll finish the tour, but I want out." And apparently they tried to talk him out of it, but his mind was made up. And once they said about Peter, once his mind is made up, forget it. You can't change it. So he decided he was done. I think he was feeling very creatively boxed in. There were a lot of different issues going on in Genesis at the time, but I think one of his biggest problems was he was feeling very boxed in creatively, and he just was like, I can't do this. I want to do my own thing. I have ideas. I have tons of ideas, and I want to pursue them. I don't want to have to put them through a democracy anymore. I'm done. So he ends up, and at the time he wasn't sure if he was going to continue music. He was kind of like, maybe I'll do films, maybe I'll write, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not sure if I'm going to be a musician anymore. Eventually he takes a few, I don't know how much, I think he took like a year off, close to a year, spent time with his family, was, I don't know, working in his yard. Who knows? He said something about cabbages. I don't know. But he basically drifts back to music after a while, and he thought, okay, music is my thing. I'm going to continue music. He takes piano lessons. That's interesting. He wanted to get to be a better musician. He played piano, but I think he wanted to be better. So he took some lessons. After a writing period, he finally convenes in Canada, I believe, and records the first record, which some people call Car, with Bob Ezrin. Um, yeah, yeah. There you go. Is that Levin again? Signed?
Tony Levin, yeah.
Yeah.
Back.
And he goes, speaking of Tony Levin, Tony Levin goes way back with Peter Gabriel. Obviously, he's on the first record, and he never stopped. I mean, he's always been with him ever since. It's pretty amazing. He said that he got something on his amp. He was doing another session, and there was a note on his amp saying, "Call this number for a session." And it was the Peter Gabriel. It was for this record.
Mm.
And he said that was a big note on my amp, because ever since I've been with him for however many 35, 40 years or whatever. So pretty crazy. So anyway, he records this record with Bob Ezrin, and who's famous for Alice Cooper, obviously. And it's released in February of 77. It goes to number 7 in the UK and number 38 in the US. It has a pretty successful single with Salisbury Hill. Obviously, that's the big song on the record. I think he thought that Here Comes the Flood might be a big song too, but I don't think it really was ever released as a single or anything. But and Modern Love I believe, was released as a single as well on this. I really enjoy this album. I think it's a great debut. I really enjoy it. So then Scratch was started soon after the second record. And it was in late 77 with Robert Fripp of King Crimson. And it was recorded in the Netherlands. And it really is a pretty fast. It seems like it's a some people absolutely love this record. I remember you did an episode with Ralph about this album, and he really dug into this really, and he loves it. He absolutely loves, and some people just absolutely swear by this album. I am kind of mixed. I feel like it's a little mixed. I love things like On the Air and DIY. And there's a couple things like White Shadow is really cool. There's a couple of really cool things on here, but I really do feel that he did tour for this album. He had a band finally, and he did tour. He had enough material to do a tour, so he toured in 1978, and then let's see. And then the whole band shaved their heads for this tour. It's like a little side note. They all shaved their heads. They looked a little odd, but it was very cool. So that takes us to 1979, where he starts recording an album number 3, in England, with Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham at the controls. I believe they may have been recording at the Manor. I'm not sure about that, I think. So they start recording this all-important third record. And so that's kind of where I'm going to hand it over to Martin at this point. And that's a little brief history for you. And let's get Martin's impressions on the third record.
Yeah, the Manor Mobile at Bath, right? So
Yes.
and I think it's kind of a similar situation today, and then a little bit at the Townhouse, I guess, is part of it as well. So yeah, May 30th, 1980. This album never certifies, but it was, like I say, a big hit in Canada, and we knew it was it was definitely a critical and cult classic. Part of the funny story is that when he turned it in, John Kalodner and Ahmet Erdogan did not like it, and literally wouldn't release it. And so there was a delay from February 80 to May. where they had to get another US distributor. He's on Charisma in England, but it had to come out on Mercury, right? And it's the only one that comes out on Mercury. And yeah, I absolutely love it. Where's my we've got the
Didn't they say to him like, "Hey Peter, is everything okay?" When they listen to the playbacks of the record, they're like, because he did a
yes,
song called "Lead a Normal Life," and they're like, "What is that? Are you all right?"
exactly. Yeah, and lead a normal life is the short bit of lyric on there is about kind of being in a an asylum, right? For
Yes.
psychiatric issues. And Peter framed this album as the history of a decaying mind, kind of jokingly about this. But yeah, so a couple other really cool things about it is that he's got Phil Collins and Jerry Marotta drumming on it, and one of his briefs to them is no cymbals on this album, sort of thing, right? But there's some amazing drumming. It kind of freed these guys up. Jerry Marotta was a little bit against that, but it freed him up. And there's even talk about how Phil would like act like he's trying to hit a cymbal, and then that allowed the mics to be placed in better places and stuff. But also the cool thing that comes along at the same time with this is the influence of like I guess Susie and the Banshees and their drummer and the recording of the drums. This sort of post-punk idea comes in, and we get that gated drum effect immediately on Intruder, which sounds amazing. So yeah, the first track is Intruder, and this is where the story is from Kenny Morris from Susie and the Banshees. They get this drum sound, and Phil Collins loved it, was impressed by the whole thing so much and the way the song came together. He wanted to be credited for coming up with that sort of thing. And then throughout, there's this is a lot of use of Fairlight on here as well. Another cool thing on here is Morris Pert on marimbas. So when you get into the second track, No Self-Control, one of the key things about that song is this recurring sort of looping, repeating fractal marimba pattern, which is the whole thing's kind of influenced by Steve Reich on here. And that's an amazing sound as well. There's wordless backing vocals. Kate Bush is involved in here. This was the second single on the album, out April 80. We got Start on here. You got Dick Morrissey on sax, which gives it a very David Bowie sort of feel, David Bowie, Iggy Pop, Berlin sort of feel as well. Fourth track, I don't remember. This was played. I just coincidentally was seeing it the other day on the Rock Palace 1978 show where they do this live, and there's also an early version of this that's much more conservative than the version you get on here, but it is a really cool song. And yeah, Jerry Marotta is doing most of the drums on here, and he sounds Phil Collins like. I mean, because
he does.
Yeah, the idea, they're both doing this thing with no cymbals, and it's minimalist, and they're both doing this really new futuristic sort of drum sound. So it sounds like the same drummer. And on here, you've got Tony Levin on stick, and he's not even really credited as actual bass, I don't believe, anywhere on the album. It's literally he's credited as stick. So you get bass playing elsewhere on here. That's like John Giblin, for example, on Not One of Us, where it's fretless bass playing, and you think it's Tony Levin, but I guess it's not.
Right.
But yeah, really cool stuff there. Family Snapshot is this heartbreaking sort of song about it's like the slow motion, the thoughts that are going through the mind of this assassin who's going to assassinate a political leader, in a car parade, cavalcade, whatever they call it. And Dave Gregory from XTC on guitar on here. So he's got cool guests here and there. And again, this there's talk that this sort of gated drum technique was inspired by XTC drums and wires as well.
Yes.
So yeah, you really get the idea of, so Peter Gabriel's kind of moving into you can almost draw a parallel with King Crimson on Discipline, David Bowie on Lodger into Scary Monsters, a little bit with Genesis, past Duke, but into Abacab, Kate Bush on The Dreaming. these people are all being influenced not by punk but by post-punk, and it's still very early for post-punk. Post-punk really picks up 81, 82, 83, but there's enough of it around at this point that it is kind of influencing these guys, and then these prog guys are influencing the post-punk guys as well. That's probably a story that should be told, that because really there's the creativity is super impressive on this sort of gaggle of albums by these people, right?
Yeah.
And through the wire, you kind of get a cheat on the cymbals, because you got tambourine acting as the hi-hat kind of thing throughout this one. And this is more of a, this is the first pretty conventional song. It's pretty thumpy, rock and rolly. It's even got cowbell in it as well. This is Jerry Marotta. Flip over to side 2, you got Games Without Frontiers, and yeah, it's funny, Tom. Same sort of thing. I thought back then, She's So Something, right? Like
Yes.
Oyster Cult, She's So 20th Century, or whatever it's called, right?
Right.
So you think of those pop and punk songs going, She's So Something, right? It's like,
Yes.
what are they
Yes.
saying, right? But of
Yeah.
course, it's just Sans Frontiers, Games Without Frontiers in
Right.
French, right?
Yeah.
And it's about war games and things like that. There's whistling in it, done by Steve. Steve Lillywhite, Hugh Padgham, and Peter on there. You got the synth bass from Larry Fast. So the guitars throughout this album, the main deal is, I mean, that just you've got these few guests here and there, but it's really so much more about. It really is so much more about synth and drums and vocals throughout this whole album, I find.
Yeah.
You've got so this was, yeah, top 10 in the UK and Canada. Not One of Us. You've got that yelping at the beginning kind of thing. To me, this song feels a lot like a David Bowie Lodger sort of song. It's got the tribal rhythm and the rainy sort of police kind of guitars on it, happy melody on it, kind of thing. Robert Fripp is guesting on here again. Mostly it's David Rhodes, but Robert Fripp is guesting, and I imagine that's that opening signature stuff is the Robert Fripp stuff on here. Lead a Normal Life, we talked about a little bit. This is like the second big marimba song on it, right? The big Morris Pert marimba song on it again. But it's the piano. It's a soft, dark piano, ballad, essentially, very kind of mournful,
Sort of like a
crazy
mood,
ending on it.
sort of a mood piece of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the end, there's this there's kind of interesting use of fading and things that are further back in the mix, and then it kind of
Yes.
has a bit of a nightmare sort of end to it. And then of course you get Biko, which is the big, massive, political song for Stephen Biko, killed in prison, 1977. And this is almost like it's weirdly it's literally the blueprint for the next album that you get at the end of this album, because this
Yes.
really sounds like a world music song, where the other songs do not sound particularly like world music songs. They sound more like just really creative David Bowie kind of ideas, sort of thing. And so yeah, super exciting album in that respect, in that it's just this bubbling creativity thing. And it comes before some of these other really cool creative albums. But to get that out of Peter Gabriel, and I can't help fantasizing, like thinking back that Phil Collins was just looking on at this the same way Roger Glover looked on at Rainbow Rising, said, "Wow, you guys kind of really hit it out of the park here, right?" um, and
Exactly.
so I totally imagine Phil Collins looking at this and saying, yeah, I can see why you left Genesis. This is way cooler than what we're doing, right? Like
Yes.
he
Yeah.
probably in the back of his mind is thinking, we're a bunch of nerds compared to you. I mean, this is
Yes.
great stuff, right?
Yeah. Peter's doing some cool cutting edge stuff over here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And he's free to do it. He's free to do whatever he wants. How cool is that, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and I'm sure at first, the drummers were going, "No cymbals. What are you talking about? Like what? Like what do you?"
Yeah.
It's but that's the kind of stuff that Peter Gabriel would do. He just, "Hey, this is what I want to do. No cymbals. I don't want." And it's actually kind of genius, right? Because you think about it, cymbals take up so much sonic space in a track,
Yeah.
and like someone like a Keith Moon is just constantly on the cymbals, and it's like, okay, that's kind of cool, but it takes up so much space. And when you just take away the cymbals, all of a sudden it's oosh, ah, ah,
Mm.
uh. It
Yeah.
just that's all you have. That's it. You got to feel there's a lot more space in the song, you know?
And this just kind of came to my mind, but it's almost like poetic in a way that he tells them no symbols, and then you think, your first thought is, well, symbols are going to sound really traditional. You can't have any traditional songs on this album or sounds on this album, right?
Mhm.
Because that sounds like the unwritten mandate, right? No
Right.
traditional sounds maybe on the album. But the cool thing is that who goes away and revolutionizes the recording of cymbals but Phil Collins, right? So it's funny. He's told no cymbals on this album, and then, in the back of his mind or subconsciously, he goes, "Well, I'll show Peter what you can do with cymbals.
Yeah.
I can go, I can go toe to toe with him on making cymbals cool enough to put on an album." And
Yeah,
then you get Abacab, and
man.
it literally, whatever you can do with cymbals, like Phil accomplishes it because they sound amazing on that album.
Yeah. No, that's a great I love your comment about Phil taking notes. That's so true. There's no doubt in my mind that was happening because and it's interesting that there's a Genesis interview from like a couple of years ago when they were making the documentary and it's funny. They asked them questions about the cross-pollination between Peter Gabriel, especially Intruder. They said something about, "Did you guys hear Intruder?" And Tony Banks was like, "Oh yeah, we heard Intruder and we thought it was really cool." And like it's almost like they took that as an influence into like things like you said, like Abacab, and
Mhm.
they were like, okay, we're gonna do these big drum sounds too.
Mhm.
And they do it successfully as well. I really enjoy Abacab.
Yeah.
So and you're right, Jerry Murata sounds a lot. I can't tell whether it's Phil or Jerry on this record. I can't tell.
Yeah.
They're both doing the very similar sort of patterns in the way they drum. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but excellent summary of this record. Way to Martin, I love it. I do want to mention that another guest on the album is Paul Weller. He plays guitar on I think it's Through the Wire. He does
Yeah.
that down, 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 so so Peter was definitely influenced, like you said, by this punk, post-punk, he was very in early. He was an early adapter, and he loved things like Susie and the Banshees, XTC, The Jam. He was all in 1979. And he was wanting and Kate Bush and wanting to bring these people in to collaborate with him. And like you said, I love those sort of spooky, haunty Kate Bush vocals in the background of is
Mhm.
it No Self Control? It's like, oh, that's just
Mhm.
love that. I just think it's brilliant. Um, and
That's really cool, Tom. I didn't know that or forgot that about him taking piano lessons. And when you bring up Kate Bush, it's almost like you can hear the Kate Bush influence on here, because Kate Bush is still a pretty conservative artist at this point. She hasn't done the dreaming yet, right?
right,
So
right.
but you can hear Kate Bush in Peter's, dark, soft piano ballad playing almost, right? So
Mhm.
it's almost like the Kate Bush influence is she might have come to mind when he's learning piano, kind of thing, because previously we've got, I think it's 3 Kate Bush albums, right? and
Mhm.
and they're all basically piano ballad albums, right? uh,
Right,
she
right.
hasn't gotten too crazy yet with what she's doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny, I never really thought of that, but I can now hear the Kate Bush influence on this album.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
loved your comments too about sort of like late period Berlin era Bowie and kind of like Scary Monsters. You're right. There's kind of like cousin records of this
Yeah.
album.
And when
I
you
love
hear that sax, you also think of Bob Ezrin, who he just worked with, right?
right,
So you think of
exactly.
Lou Reed and all that sort of stuff. So it's like some of that might have come from that influence as well, right?
No, absolutely. And I also wanted to tell the story of because you had mentioned Dave Gregory from XTC. They were making, I think it was Drums and Wires in the Manor with Lily White and Padgham, and they got Lily White got a call or something about, oh, I got a call from Peter Gabriel's management. He wants me to produce his next record. And I guess Dave Gregory was like, "Are you kidding me? Say yes immediately. Like, call him right now and say yes." And he's like, "And by the way, here's my number if you need a guitar player for those sessions." He was a huge fan. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, so it's
Yeah,
interesting
love
to
that.
Yeah, he's so excited to
Yeah.
be to be on it. And
Hey,
so he did call him for the sessions. But anyway, and the last thing I'm going to say is, I agree. I also love your point about Biko being kind of like I never really thought of that before, that Biko's kind of like where he's going next. After sort of this weird, I don't know how to describe it, this sort of strange, static sort of, uh, you know, I don't know how to describe it. Just that the mood of this record kind of shifts a little bit with Biko at the end, into more world music. And this is really, I also want to mention that this is kind of the first time that he really goes all in with kind of starting with the rhythm, right? He becomes this thing where he starts with the rhythm before he does anything else. He wants a cool rhythm, and then he goes on top of that,
yeah.
right? And like Intruder's a great example. I mean, Phil just was going do ja, and he just said, keep doing that for 5 minutes. That sounds amazing. And he just keep going. He just recorded it for 5 minutes and then figured out a song over that. So it's pretty cool. It's just
Hmm.
that alone.
Neat. Yeah.
So anyway, amazing record. I love this album to this day, still love to death. So it's such an artistic statement record. And amazing that Atlantic turned it down. I mean, and I guess Ahmet Erdogan said something like, "Who wants to hear about South African political prisoners? What?" Like they just didn't get it at all, and then they ended up regretting dropping him because Mercury takes it and it goes like, what did it was like top 10 in the US or something, almost close to it, in the US. So anyway, so that takes us to, let's move on to the next record. That takes us to into Security, which was, I mean, Geffen. He was by this point that he's on Geffen because the same A&R guy that turned this record down goes back to him and wants him back, and they sign him for Geffen. And
Yeah.
so in the US, this is for US and Canada, right? It's still a Charisma in the UK. And Security is released on September 10th, 1982 on Geffen in the US. Recorded in 1981. I believe it's in his house. Part of it was recorded in his home, and I think part of it was in a studio. Is that right?
Yeah, home studio, but it's a good studio, and I think it's the same mobile again they use.
Probably,
Something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, as a mobile outside his house or whatever. And of course, this album, you mentioned the sampling on 3. He really goes to town with Fairlight sampling on 4. And it really kind of groundbreaking in a way because he goes out into the field and records stuff on his own and for sampling purposes. And there's a huge, if you check it out on YouTube, there's this big long special called like the South Bank Show or something where they show him recording this album, and it's fascinating. Um, but anyway, that's enough backstory, I guess, for this one. I'll hand it over to you for Peter Gabriel 4 Security.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just look at the spine of mine. Yeah, I mean, I have a Canadian copy. This is the one I bought as a new release. It doesn't say security anywhere on it, I don't think. I don't even remember maybe there was a sticker that
I
said
think
that.
the
Oh,
hype.
actually, look at
Yeah,
that.
there was a
It does
sticker.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, it does say security on there. Huh?
Oh, it
Hang on.
does. Okay. Okay. All right.
Maybe you see it in the hole there, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
about right. So,
Geffen forced his
anyways,
hand, I think, right? He just wanted to call it Peter Gabriel. He didn't want to call it anything.
yeah, and he came up with security. He was reluctant to call it anything, but he did come up with that. But this whole thing about naming them, I don't think is all that cool or impressive, or you may as well name them. I mean, the real estate of a title is similar real estate to all of the lyrics and similar real estate to the names of the songs. Why not use it, kind of thing? So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any great point in doing this. I mean, you're not trying to say they're all the same album or anything like that. It's
And
so
people make up names for him anyway, right? We call it car, melt, scratch.
exactly, yeah.
You're making up
Now he
any.
has to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and the cover is actually a picture of Peter Gabriel, and there's some sort of really crazy manipulative photo thing to it. I always thought that was one of the terrorists at Munich or something like that, the Olympics or whatever. I mean, I never really thought about it very much as a kid. I just thought it was a terrorist in a ski mask kind of thing.
Yeah, that
But
is a very just like I don't know. That's a very disturbing cover. It's just you're like,
It
what?
is, yeah, it is, and it's very, artsy. Reminds me of like, Brian Eno album covers were kind of like this around the time, right?
Yeah,
Um, but starts off with Rhythm of the Heat, 5:15 again, just a continuation of Biko kind of thing, because it's just massive rhythms and really cool sounds all throughout it, based on Carl Jung's experience while observing a group of African drummers. No guitar on it, no guitar credit at least. It's Larry Fast, Tony Levin, and Jerry Marotta. Um, Love it to death. Really cool, epic sort of song. It's got that amazing, speeding up version at the end. The rhythm's got my soul and
oh
all this.
yeah,
It comes over incredible live. It's just so well put together. And as a microcosm for the album, and as a microcosm for our comparison between these two albums, it feels like I've worked out the tooling of this completely innovative new kind of music that I'm doing. Now I'm gonna, I experimented with that tooling throughout the last album, and now I'm just gonna put that tooling into use, and possibly on better songs, or possibly more integrated into the songs, kind of thing, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
San Jacinto, I guess he met this Apache Indian who told him the story about an initiation rite where there's like a rattlesnake in a sack, and the kid's got to get bit by the rattlesnake, and if you live, you're a man now, kind of thing. So it's a really cool lyric. And again, it's just continuing on this great sort of feel of the album, where the album's starting to feel almost like a concept album in a way, right? Because right off the bat, you have indigenous Africans, and now you have indigenous North Americans. So it's feeling kind of conceptual, right? The conceptual falls away when you get to "I Have the Touch," but again, what a great song, driven by this like propulsive sort of electronic drum beat thing. Really catchy. Just a great lyric about the value of human touch. And almost like rubbing up against people on the subway and all this kind of stuff. It's a really innovative, cool lyric, and just such a well put together song. The Family in the Fishing Net. Oddly, John Ellis from the Vibrators is on this. John Ellis goes on to play a lot with Peter Hamill from
I didn't know
Vandergraaf.
that. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it says. Yeah, so yeah, pretty interesting. I interviewed him once. I don't know if I ever asked him about that, but the cool thing about this is this song, I guess it's like a surrealistic sort of obscured look at like a wedding ceremony, but it sounds very much like again an indigenous wedding ceremony, maybe from South America or the Southeast Asia or Africa. It's said to be couched in sort of like voodoo talk language.
Yeah,
But
headless chickens.
yeah, right.
Like,
And you officially, like, as reading, it says compares a modern day wedding to a voodoo sacrifice. But I've never, that title has always sort of psyched me out from looking into it and knowing a lot about it. But to me, again, the neat thing about the title and how it ties in is like caught in the mesh. It says in it, right? So it's like you caught almost like a spider in a spider web, a new member of the family sort of thing. But again, we're feeling like the world music goes along with the world lyrics throughout, and literally we've had 4 songs on this side that have those sorts of themes. You get over to Shock the Monkey, and I've never liked this song. I don't like these I hate Steam and Sledgehammer, can't stand them, right? Like, I don't like these up tempo
big time.
yeah, big time. I just they're absolutely automatically at the bottom of my list of Peter Gabriel songs that I like, right?
Yeah.
But this is not to do, as they say, it's not to do with the Milgram's 37, the experiment sort of thing. It's more like a metaphor for love kind of thing, and the twitchiness of love and all this. But I just I don't like the, and that keyboard line always sounded like fake brain keyboard horns.
Yeah.
I just don't
Yeah.
like that idea. But then you get to Lay Your Hands on Me, and again, very messianic, as we talked about earlier. Morris Pert is back, but he's doing timbales this time. So, and it's more integrated into the drumming thing, drumming as opposed to percussion. It is percussion, but it's percussion that's integrated into the whole thing. It's kind of like a lick that he does. It's not the whole thing throughout. But really cool song. Wallflower, one that people don't really know or talk about very much. It's again, tie back to Biko. It's about political prisoners again, this time in Latin America. So you get that total tie back to that, and it's world music at the same time. As is Lay Your Hands on Me. Lay Your Hands on Me is said to be just a little bit, more or less about faith healers and stuff like that. But to me, with the music that you get there, and with the cool obscurity and the poetry of the lyrics, it really does feel more shamanic to me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it fits right in with Family and the Fishing Net, and Rhythm of the Heat, all that stuff, San Jacinto. So really cool. And then Kiss of Life is just kind of a weird, again, it's world music, but now it's like jumpy party calypso music, right? And it doesn't really fit into the album for me. It's never one that I really liked. But again, to me, it feels like it's integrated into the album, A, for being world music, essentially, like I say, calypso, but B, it sounds like part of the celebration of the family, like the reception in Family and the Fishing Net, right? It's like dancing around, and there's Peter Peters playing surdo drum, like an African drum sort of thing on it as well. So to me, Kiss of Life literally sounds like it's part of Family and the Fishing Net, the actual party at this crazy, indigenous wedding somewhere, this tribal sort of really crazy wedding. So those two, they almost should have put them together, right, as a part one or a part two or something, and that would have made a neat sort of conceptual side. But to pan it out, you frame this as a little bit of an album war. And so if I were to compare these two albums, I feel like this is almost like the more self-aware, self-assured, I've sorted it out, and it hangs together better. But the first one's more like the excitement of discovery and the excitement of being pioneering. Although is still a very interesting, daring album. But by this point, we do have Kate Bush, The Dreaming. We've got King Crimson. We've at least got Discipline, if not Beat by this. But yeah, we've got Beat by this point, because this is 82, right? So
right.
So things have happened. We've got David Bowie's greatest album of all time, I think, Scary Monsters, by this time, right?
Killer.
Yeah. So, and there's more post-punk, and people talk about Talking Heads. I'm not a fan, but people talk about them. And Brian Eno's continuing to do interesting things. We've got Robert Fripp Exposure has come out.
Oh, right.
Back in 78 or 79.
79.
But yeah, so this to me, it almost feels a little bit like, Scary Monsters is like the actualization of the excitement of Lodger. Beat is the actualization of the excitement of Discipline. Dreaming is the actualization of the excitement of discovering Peter Gabriel and your last album, Never Forever. Abacab has happened. Abacab is the actualization of the excitement of discovering Peter Gabriel again. And really not really Duker, and then there were three, because those are both pretty conservative albums still. It's almost like, and I've done a podcast episode, and I've mentioned this term before, but these albums that I call cusp albums, right?
Yes.
Where you're like you're super excited because you've discovered some cool new things, and you're mixing the future with the present. not so much the past, but you're mixing the future and the present together. And I think you get that. I think you get that on Melt. And
Right.
then here it's just kind of all about, using the things we discovered on the last one. So the excitement level kind of goes down a little, but like the professionalism and possibly the surface impressiveness of it goes up a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, I love your idea of, he found something on 3 and then he went all in on 4. Like it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now I'm really gonna, I mean, because this album is, we talked about rhythms. This is just, I mean, almost every song has this based on some kind of rhythm they worked up.
Yeah.
And more than even than this. Um I would say Wallflower is the only song that's to me that seems like it's not based on some
Mhm.
sort of rhythm.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, no, I agree with you. It's I love the idea of like the excitement on 3, and then this is more like he's going in a direction, with world music, which he's doubling down on the world music. And I agree with you. Like things like Kiss of Life. It's funny. I listened to this album in preparation, and Kiss of Life is always to me like like that's a good song if it was done in a different way. Like I'm not into the calypso party thing. Like
Yeah.
if you listen to that song, you're like that song could be really good if it was done in a different way. But I love, I mean, things like Rhythm of the Heat. I mean, oh, that is just fantastic. And I can't imagine seeing that live. You probably saw it live. I mean,
Mm.
it's just such intensity at the end. Um and just that whole like slow burn at the beginning, and that the rhythm is around, the rhythm has control, and then the rhythm has my soul, and it just explodes. And it's just such a great, that to me is the culmination of this like line of thinking he was in. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, no, I'm with you. It's hard to decide between these two because I think both of them have a lot to offer. And I love your idea of transition record. Like these transition albums that many people were going through at the time. Absolutely. I think Bowie's a great example, like I said, Kate Bush. I mean, those are all great examples of people that were changing and growing and having transitional records, and then hitting the jackpot. Um, but anyway, it's tough. I mean, if you have to choose between these two, you're already going in your head. I can tell you're already kind of going in circles in your head. So if you had to choose on these, which one would you pick?
I think I would go with Melt, just because of the cultish excitement. You're in that record. You're in that record in a dark room with Peter, and then you're also in that record with a limited number of fans. When it gets to the next one, you feel they're on Geffen now. He's figured it out.
Yes.
He's like confident, brash Peter Gabriel now because he knows how great he is, and all
Yes.
this, and the band's huge or big enough. I mean, that album goes gold. So yeah, just there's just something more cult and cool about that thing that we get with the third one, because the first two are actually quite conservative, right?
Right.
um
Right.
and
Yeah.
so and so yeah, I think you go with this one as a music nerd. You have to go with Melt.
Yeah, because you're right. Because Shock the Monkey was on MTV. It was all over MTV at the time, and it was a big single. And it was all of a sudden, it was like, oh, everybody knows Peter Gabriel now. And you're right. I love your point. Like because I feel the same way. There's something about when they're not as mainstream yet. They're still sort of cultish, but they're kind of on the cusp, and that's an exciting time to be a fan of an artist, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of examples of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you're
And
like, it's more.
come to think of it, that you mentioned, shocked up. So there's two songs on here I don't like. I don't think there's any songs on Melt that I don't like. So there's
Yeah.
two on here that could bother me a little bit: Kiss Life and Shock the Monkey, right?
Yeah, no, and I'm gonna have to agree with you. Because I am a music nerd and I love this. There's something about this record, like you said, you mentioned excitement. There's something about this album that has a kinetic energy about it, and I think it also helped that he had he had Willie White and Pageant with him, who are brilliant producers and engineers, and really got some great sounds on this as well. And he's just experimenting all over the place on this. And I love that story that the Atlantic dropped him because of that. I mean, he was so far ahead at this point they were listening to it going, I don't get this. What is this? I don't
Yeah.
understand it. They were to say, like, apparently they mentioned the Doobie Brothers to him or something. You sound more like the Doobie Brothers. He's like, what? He was on a completely different plane at this point, and they're listening to things like No Self Control and Not One of Us and Lead a Normal Life, and they're just and then Biko, and they're like, nobody's doing political songs. What are you doing? Like, no, they didn't get it at all. So to me, that a sign that he was ahead of the times, and he was always pushing the envelope. And this album really, and then you look at the cover, it's like the guy's puts himself in a bad light. I mean, it looks horrible, but it's awesome. It's like, Hypnosis kills it on the cover too.
Yeah.
So I love it
Yeah.
all.
And like I say, thinking about, oh, what Phil must have thought of this. I think of that record and I go like, every musician of every stripe, the most mainstream musicians, whatever, the most obscure musicians, the most ornery punks, I just feel like all of them would listen to that album as a practitioner in the music business and go, that's kind of the coolest thing I think I've ever heard. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can tell other musicians are like, what is he doing? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
For sure. He was influencing people at this point, I'm pretty sure of it. And like I said, I mean, when I first heard Games Without Frontiers on radio, I was like, what? That is a crazy song, but I love it.
Yeah.
There's something about it that I loved,
But when we talk about these mainstream musicians listening to it and saying it's pretty cool, a lot of them would listen to it as they would see a concept car or a runway at a fashion show, right? Where it's like theoretically amazing and cool, but it's impractical, right? But
Yeah.
they would listen to it and go, that's just an incredible exercise in music making. I sure as heck ain't gonna do it, but I'm glad he did it, right?
I'm glad someone's kicking down doors. I don't know, so I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, no, I think, and I do, there's no doubt that with Abacab, you can hear Genesis for sure following in the footsteps. There's no question. And I love Abacab. Not a lot of people love Abacab, but I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I don't know what else to say. I mean, the only other thing I was going to mention before I forget was that you mentioned the wailing. That's another thing that I love that he does, that whole, oh yeah,
Yeah.
he's doing those big wails, and
Yeah.
it's just like you hear that and you're like, wow, who does that, just before the song even starts, he's doing something like, oh,
Yeah.
and you're like,
For sure.
it's so cool, it's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, that's I would say that's a wrap. I don't know really what else to say. You really wrapped up those two records very well. And if you're a Peter Gabriel fan and you stayed with us this long, go listen to Peter Gabriel. Go listen to these albums again if you haven't listened to them in a while, because they're still just very, very killer. And there's something about those. I always say there's something about the first four, and then it becomes kind of different after that for Peter. But anyway, if you stayed with us this long, we appreciate it. I always have to say, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Got to say that, and I'd just like to thank Martin for joining me today. Thank you so much, Martin.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you had fun. We'll do this again sometime.
All right.
So Peter Gabriel 3 wins it. So check it out. Tell us if you disagree. Maybe some people will be like, "Well, you kidding me? 4 is just off the charts, crazy good. I can't believe you would pick 3 over 4." So who knows? Everyone hears it different, right? So, but thanks again. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Curless Mania. Thank you.